Hi, I'm Linda. Thanks for joining me today in our peaceful suburban neighborhood. My mornings are usually pretty predictable. I prepare breakfast for my son Danny before he heads off to school. Tom, my husband, is typically already on the phone by then, laughing loudly at whatever crisis his sister Rachel is having. This morning, the sun hadn't even fully risen yet, but there was Tom, coffee in one hand, phone in the other. Rachel was going on about her car breaking down again and how she needed help with that, along with more money for her boys' endless activities. I'll take care of it. Let me see what I can do, Tom replied, eager to help. I glanced over at Danny, sitting silently, eating his cereal as though he wanted to blend into the background. It hurt me to see him like this. When Tom finally hung up, I decided to bring up something that had been weighing on my mind. Tom, Danny's been really interested in that summer coding camp. I think it would be great if we could look into it for him. Tom barely looked up from his phone, distracted by his messages. Yeah, but you know how tight things are right now with my mom needing help and Rachel's kids needing new laptops for school. I pressed on, but Danny's interests are important too. Tom sighed, irritated. Linda, we've talked about this. My family needs me. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. It was Tom's mother, Eleanor, sweeping in as usual with her air of superiority. She barely acknowledged me before turning to Tom. Darling, you won't believe the morning I've had, she began, but I had already tuned out, focusing instead on packing Danny's lunch, feeling that familiar hollow ache in my stomach. This was the daily routine, Eleanor and Rachel calling with their emergencies, and Tom rushing to their aid. As I handed Danny his lunchbox and watched him leave for school, I couldn't help but wonder how much longer I could watch my son be pushed aside for his cousins. At dinner that night, the absence of Danny's future in our conversation was stark. Tom talked about helping Rachel with her car troubles and transferring money for his nephew's new laptops. You should have seen how happy they were. Linda, I wish Danny understood the importance of family like that, he said, completely missing the point. I stopped mid-bite. Family includes Danny. Tom, when was the last time you did something just for him? Tom frowned, clearly taken aback. He's fine. He doesn't need constant attention. In that moment, I realized that Tom's family was his priority, and Danny and I had become secondary players in their drama. After dinner, Tom retreated to his office, mumbling about managing funds for his mother. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the uneaten food, feeling the weight of my situation settle in. I was alone in this, but I was determined to change it, for Danny and for myself. The next steps wouldn't be easy, but as I cleared the dishes, I knew one thing for sure: I wouldn't let my son be overlooked. Not anymore. Later that evening, I logged into Danny's college fund account, something I always did with a sense of pride. But today, my heart sank. Thousands of dollars were missing. I double-checked, hoping I'd made a mistake. But there was no denying it. I confronted Tom. You gave Danny's college fund to Rachel's kids? Babe, they needed it for school. It's an investment in their future. And what about Danny? His future doesn't matter. Come on, it's not like that. He's smart. He'll figure something out. Family helps family. That's just it, isn't it, Tom? Danny isn't family enough to deserve his own savings? Tom shrugged, sensing my anger. I'm doing my best here. No, Tom, you're doing what's easiest. You're avoiding conflict with your mom and sister by sacrificing your own son. The silence that followed was thick with tension. Tom's avoidance was all the answer I needed. It was up to me now. Danny needed someone to fight for him, and that someone was going to be me. A few days later, I found myself at a local coffee shop, chatting with a mom whose son attended the same private school as Rachel's kids. What started as a casual conversation about school fundraisers quickly turned into a strategic information gathering session. So the school is pretty selective with scholarships, huh? Must be an expensive tuition. Oh, absolutely. It's ridiculous. But you know, some people get creative with funding. Creative? How? She leaned in slightly, her voice dropping. Well, you didn't hear it from me, but there's been talk, she whispered. Some parents funnel money through different accounts, even for scholarships. There's a lot of politics involved. Politics. That word stuck with me. family helps family suddenly felt like a much darker phrase, part of a system built on manipulation and secrecy. I thanked her for the chat, my mind racing. That evening, I found myself at the school, posing as a prospective parent interested in scholarships. The admissions director, a sharply dressed woman with a polished smile, was more than willing to explain their prestigious program. How do most families manage the tuition? I asked casually. We offer a variety of scholarships, some based on need, others on merit. And, of course, there are private donations. Private donations? I probed further. Yes, some of our benefactors are very generous. They want to give back and support the community. It's all very discreet. Of course. Discreet. There it was again. The secrecy. It was clear that beneath the polished surface of this system, there was something more, an intricate web of financial control. This was about more than just money. It was about influence. As I left with brochures, a new sense of purpose filled me. If Tom and his family were part of this system, they weren't just jeopardizing Danny's future, they were part of a game that controlled far more than just college funds. On the drive home, the streetlights blurred as my mind raced. How many others were out there, silenced by the weight of financial dependence? How deep did this go? When I got home, Tom was lounging on the couch, flipping through TV channels. He glanced at me, his expression distant. Did you find what you were looking for? He asked, barely acknowledging me. More than you know, Tom, more than you know. The pieces were falling into place. Tomorrow, I would put my plan into motion. For Danny, for everyone trapped in this web of family first. I wasn't just confronting Tom anymore. I was getting ready to expose the truth at the heart of it all. The next morning, as the sun began to rise, I was already on my way back to the school. I clutched a folder full of carefully prepared questions, all under the guise of exploring scholarships for Danny. But my true mission was to meet with Paula, the financial advisor I had spoken to during my last visit. Good morning, Paula. Thanks for meeting with me again. I really appreciate it. My pleasure, Linda. I know how stressful school funding can be. What can I help you with today? Well, I began, lowering my voice. I heard from a few parents about managing funds creatively here. I was wondering. Paula leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper. It's not something we openly discuss, but yes, there are certain options available, depending on your needs. I'm interested in scholarships, or maybe something a little more discreet. I'm not sure how it all works. She nodded, pulling a thick folder from her drawer. Let's see what we can do for you. It's about finding the right fit for your situation. As she flipped through the documents, I saw names and figures, breadcrumbs leading me closer to the truth. So all these contributions go directly to the students? Mostly, yes, but in special cases, funds are managed through a third party. It could be a parent, an aunt or uncle, a trust of sorts. Exactly, she confirmed. And could I see who those trustees are, just for reference? Paula hesitated before pulling up a digital ledger on her screen. I quickly skimmed through the papers, and there it was, Rachel's name, not her son's, tied to large financial transactions. Well, that's curious, I muttered, storing the information in my mind. As the meeting drew to a close, Paula said something that made my heart race. With all the scrutiny lately, we need to be cautious. There's talk of an audit coming soon, a full investigation of the accounts. An audit? I repeated, feeling my pulse quicken. That sounds serious. It's just a formality, of course, but yes, it does make everyone a little uneasy. Of course, I understand. Thanks for the heads up. I left with a sense of purpose, my mind already racing ahead with the next steps. Later that day, I casually dropped by Eleanor's house. Tom's mother had a habit of boasting about how generous her children were, and today was no exception. Tom's been such a help to Rachel and the boys, Eleanor said, her voice full of pride. He's always looking out for them. Family always supports each other. I heard the school might be getting an audit soon, I said, keeping my tone casual. It's nice that everything's so transparent, isn't it? Eleanor paused, her teacup frozen in midair. An audit? But why? Oh, I'm sure it's just a routine check. It's probably for peace of mind, to make sure everything is in order. I watched as the worry crept into her face, the seed of doubt planted firmly. Well, I suppose I'll mention it to Rachel. Probably a good idea, I replied as I left, feeling confident my plan was working. The news of an audit would spread like wildfire, and with Rachel and Tom's questionable financial activities, panic was bound to follow. The next morning, I was in the kitchen when the phone rang. It was the school's number. My heart skipped a beat. Good morning, this is Paula from the school. We've begun a preliminary review of our accounts, and it looks like there might be some discrepancies. Really? That sounds concerning, I said, feigning surprise. Yes, we've received a few anonymous tips. We're digging into everything thoroughly. That must be a real hassle, I replied sympathetically. It is, but it's necessary. We take the integrity of our finances very seriously. I could almost hear the tension in her voice through the phone. The trap had been set. Now, I just had to wait. A few hours later, as I was watering the plants, Tom burst through the door, red-faced with a mix of anger and confusion. Eleanor was close behind, her usual calm demeanor replaced by clear worry. Linda, what have you done? Tom shouted, slamming the door behind him. Me? What are you talking about? They're auditing the school. They're asking about the money I sent for Rachel's kids. Eleanor interjected, her voice shaking. Money you shouldn't have sent. I stayed calm. You've embarrassed all of us. If this gets out, our reputation? Your reputation was built on lies. Eleanor, you stole from your own son. I was helping my family, Tom argued, but even he knew his words lacked strength. But at what cost? Tom, who really is your family? He didn't answer, his silence the loudest admission of guilt. That evening, the tension was palpable. News traveled fast in a close-knit town. Neighbors whispered as they passed our house, casting sympathetic or judgmental glances. The phone rang again. It was Rachel, her voice frantic. Tom, what have you done? They're asking about the scholarships. The money, it was for you and the kids. Tom, Rachel's voice trembled. I did it all for you. You've put us all in danger, she snapped. The blame game had begun. Calls flew back and forth, accusations flying, and the family began to unravel under the weight of their deceit. As the storm raged, I sat quietly. The anger I once felt had been replaced by cold, determined resolve. This was necessary. This was justice. By the time the next community meeting rolled around, the whispers had grown into outright avoidance. As Eleanor, Rachel, and Tom walked into the room, people physically distanced themselves, leaving conspicuous gaps. The isolation was unmistakable. Look at what you've done, Eleanor hissed at Tom. I did what I thought was right, Tom muttered, but his voice was hollow. You fought for the wrong side, I stood up and said. The room fell silent. We trusted you, Tom, but you and your family played us for fools. You used your own son's future as leverage, but not anymore. This community doesn't tolerate deceit. As I sat back down, I could feel the shift in the room. A quiet understanding seemed to spread among the gathered people. The tide was turning. When I returned home, the sky had turned vibrant with the colors of sunset. The hardest part was over. Our peaceful town, once calm and uneventful, was now buzzing with the aftershocks of a scandal that had exposed the cracks in the family facade. Tom's actions had not only jeopardized his job, but had also torn apart the image his family had built for themselves. The following day, as I entered the cafe, I could feel the weight of many eyes on me. This time, it wasn't pity, it was respect. I sat down with the school principal and a few local benefactors. Their tone had completely shifted. We've been discussing Danny's situation, the principal said, and we all agree that a bright young man like him shouldn't suffer because of his father's mistakes. Absolutely, one of the benefactors added. We're looking into a scholarship to cover his tuition for the coding camp he's interested in. It was a powerful reminder of the community's resilience and compassion. Thank you, I said, feeling a warmth spread through me. This means more than I can express. As I left the cafe, I felt lighter than I had in months. Neighbors waved, some stopping to offer their support. It was a stark contrast to the isolation surrounding Tom, Eleanor, and Rachel. At home, I found Danny working on his homework. When I told him the news, his face lit up with the brightest smile I'd seen in ages. Really, Mom? That's awesome. I won't let you down. I know you won't, honey. This is your time to shine. Later that day, I found Tom sitting alone in the park, a shadow of the man he once was. He didn't notice me at first, but when I approached, he looked up, surprise flashing across his face before it gave way to resignation. I just wanted to tell you, I said. Danny got the scholarship. He's going to that summer camp after all. Good. He deserves it, Tom mumbled, his voice barely audible. Tom, it didn't have to be this way. I know, he sighed. I just thought I was doing the right thing. That's the problem, I said quietly. You didn't want to see. You chose not to see your family. He nodded, the weight of his choices settling in. I have a lot to think about. Yes, you do. I turned and left him to his thoughts. The road ahead for him would be long and filled with the consequences of his own actions. But for Danny and me, the future was looking brighter. We had weathered the storm, and with the support of those around us, we were ready to rebuild stronger and wiser. As I walked back home, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the path ahead. The cool evening air promised new beginnings, the sweet scent of justice not served in courts, but by the unwavering moral compass of a community that had chosen to stand for what was right. For Danny and me, this wasn't just an end, it was a fresh start, a testament to the strength of a mother's love and the resilience of those who do what's right. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video. Stay stunned.